forget, you can hear the full-length, longer version wherever you get your podcasts. In a way, your whole life has been the prep, hasn't it, for this, not so much an interview, more a summit. That wasn't just any chuckle. That was the chuckle of one of the most highly respected, highly regarded, high-achieving, and I will add the word lovely, producer, director, creative person, basically ideas factory that is John Lloyd.
I don't know what to say, Rob. Thank you.
When you say John Lloyd, I think most people would go chronologically.
Tennis player.
They would go, for me, they'd go not 9 o'clock news, they'd go Spitting Image, Blackadder, QI, right? I would say those are the main things. But there's this other side to you that I'm particularly interested in, which is commercials, which is making some of the best commercials that there have been.
Like so many things in my life, it came about by accident. An old girlfriend had started working in advertising, and she said, do you want to come and do an ad? There's a new company that needs directors who haven't done it before because they can't get proper ones. Thank you. Okay. And I hadn't directed it. I directed one pop video. That's all I'd done.
Which one?
Well, it did win a Grammy, Rob, but it was Genesis Land of Confusion with 380 spitting image puppets.
I didn't
Have you seen
know
that?
Yeah, yeah. It's coming back to me now. But I didn't know you'd done that. But presumably, if it was Spitting Image, then you would have done. The band are in it as well, or was it just the puppets?
No, just the puppets of the band.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. Just puppets of the band and just, everyone you can imagine. Highlight being Ronald Reagan atop a sort of life-size Stegosaurus dinosaur as a cowboy riding this thing. It was like, I don't know, 8 feet tall or something with a puppet on top. And it had 2 puppeteers being the legs inside. So we wandered around London with this life-size dinosaur with Reagan on top and shooting outside St. Paul's Cathedral in the middle of the night. And there were 5 police cars following us around. And eventually I said to one of the cops, sorry, is there a problem? We do have permission. He said, no, we're just really enjoying it. It's very funny.
Did you direct more pop videos after that?
No, only the one.
Just the greatest pop
you
video
know,
of all
once you've won
time.
the Grammy, you just... No, I mean, there's never been an opportunity. Nobody's ever asked me again.
So you had directed one pop video, and then this ex-girlfriend said, this company are looking for directors for commercials.
Yeah, I shot my first ad in 87, the Phileas Fogg one. And then a couple more of those followed. And then Barclaycard, I think, started in... When did the wall come down, the Berlin Wall? Was that 89?
I think it was.
So it would have been 89, 90 we started doing Barclaycard, because we were the first camera crew into Red Square after...
Is that
after
right?
The Berlin
Is
Wall
that
came
right?
down, yeah.
I didn't know
Shooting
that.
the one with... do you know the ad? It's quite a famous Barclaycard. It's the Upside Down Ambassador, where Rowan's character is a guy called Richard Latham, who's this sort of incompetent spy. He's seen the ambassador doing some financial transactions in Moscow, and so he creates this sort of theatrical moment where he hangs the ambassador upside down in a mail bag, with his hands tied, and then reveals him to the embassy staff says, you're a mole, aren't you? And it turns out that what he's done is he's lost his Barclaycard. And the product deal was that if you lost your Barclaycard, they would get one out to you anywhere in the world.
Right.
So Rowan says, what? A Barclaycard to here in Moscow? And then this motorcycle courier arrives at his shoulder and he goes,
Your history with him, I would imagine, began with Not the 9 o'clock news.
Yeah.
How did that, you've told this a million times, John, but indulge me. How did that come about? Because it was a seminal part of my youth. It was massive. So how did that come about?
I mean, over the years, the gossip is that the controller of BBC Two is a wonderful guy called Brian Wenham, who's famous for inventing pot black, oddly. That was his great achievement. And I suppose starting Not the 9 o'clock news, because he said to Light Entertainment, you haven't really done anything really original for 10 years since Monty Python. Where's the new stuff, And they got really huffy and go, Well, but the two Ronnies, yeah, but it's 20 years old. It's brilliant, but it's, they were masters, weren't they? The BBC Light Entertainment were the best in the world, without any question, and they knew it too.
Yeah.
And they didn't want a controller from Current Affairs telling them what to do. So I happened to turn up, and they thought, oh, this guy, here's a full guy, here's a complete klutz. It's completely fresh. He's got a good track record. It looks plausible.
Yeah.
Let's give him a go. And then they found
And that was not the 9 o'clock
Yeah.
news. How soon did it take off? Not 9 o'clock news.
Well, the first series was a kind of, it had moments of genius in it, but there was something about the chemistry it didn't quite. It was sort of edgy and slightly awkward, but it had moments, and it started to get good around. I remember a wonderful sketch written by Andy Hamilton called "The Stunt Pope."
Yes.
The idea is the Pope apparently does all his own stunts, like standing on high balconies and all that kind of stuff, but actually there's a stunt Pope who does it all for him. And then there was a wonderful sketch about Monty Python's Life of Brian. Did you ever see that one?
Where they are talking about John Cleese instead of JC. Even the
comic
initials are the
messiah.
same.
Yes, that's
Yes,
right.
yes. I remember that.
Where Monty Python's become the kind of state religion.
Yes.
And to mock John Cleese.
Well, it's funny you say that, because when I went to see those Python gigs at the O2, and I've spoken on this podcast to John Cleese and to Michael Palin, and I said the same to both of them, was that the big impression that I came away with from those gigs was that it was like a secular religion. It was like we were going to give thanks. Isn't that funny? And all those years ago, you sort of, you put them in that position. So
true, Rob. So true.
So off it goes into the stratosphere. It becomes massive. When I was at school, everybody watched it. Everybody talked about it. They bought the albums. They bought the books. Everybody fancied Pamela Stevenson. That's where she met Billy Connolly, wasn't
Yes,
it?
it was,
He's
yeah.
doing a sketch on there. The next big thing, correct me if I'm wrong, Spitting Image.
Well, it would have actually Blackadder was next.
Oh, Blackadder
think
was
just-
before Spitting Image?
Blackadder, first series of Blackadder was 83.
First series of Blackadder is viewed, I would say, again, please correct me, John, if I'm wrong, as not working the way you wanted it to. And then in the second one, it finds its feet, and it became this huge thing. First one had Peter Cook in it, didn't it?
Yeah.
What you must have crossed paths with him.
Yeah, I knew Peter very well. He was a very good friend of mine. I got to know him really relatively late in his life.
Yeah.
And we did some work together that was really good fun. There's a thing you can see online. Have you ever seen A Life in Pieces?
Yes.
I think that's absolutely marvellous.
He's kind of the definition of a comic genius.
Yeah, well, again, it touches on the numinous, really, because the thing about Peter is a proper genius, because
By which you mean what?
Well, the thing is, I think somebody said the difference between talent and genius is that talent makes an effort and genius doesn't have to try, really.
Yes.
I never saw Peter do any work. I never saw him
Yes.
pick up a pencil or, retype something or rehearse anything, really. It just arrived, He would just stick his spade in the ground and out would come gushing comedy.
Yeah.
So it was a joy to work with, because, as I say, as a detail person, it's a perfect match, because Peter would just splurge stuff out and I would, squirrel it all away and put it in the right order and tidy it up and put the punchlines on. We got on really well. It was marvellous.
What about Dudley Moore? Did you come across Dudley?
Yes. Again, I knew Peter much better, but he would sometimes drop by,
Would he?
have lunch and all that.
And would that be a relaxed lunch, or would they do bits? Or because there's that interesting distinction between comedians who are funny a lot of the time, effortlessly, and those who burn brightly on the screen but make very little effort to be funny. I name no names. Oh, you're so dirty. Whereas there are others who delight in joie de vivre and wanting to make the day lighter. What was it like when you were together with both of them?
Well, Peter's just naturally funny. He just gets up and he's funny, and he has a drink and he's twice as funny. But we also had a lot of serious conversations too, because you get to know somebody very well. It's not just jokes. That's another kind of pain in the ass. I mean, is the ones who never stops telling jokes.
Oh but it's always a thing when you say, "Oh, he's funny." Oh, he's very funny. I say about Lee Mack, "Oh, he's so funny." When you're with him having dinner, breakfast, lunch, whatever, and there can be an unintended subtext that, which is, as you say, "Oh God," but no, it's not. It's just great. It's just so funny. You just laugh so much.
Well, Lee Mack is a great person, isn't he? I mean, he's not just funny. He's he's incredibly bright and very nice and interesting and so on. So he's funny in the right way. He's just naturally witty.
So Blackadder, right? Just glorious. We could spend 6 hours just talking about Blackadder. Peter Cook appeared in the first series. Let's go to the second series. Was it the bringing on board of Ben Elton that then changed all that? What was the difference between the first and the second series?
Ben Elton and Richard Gosler got to be friends. I knew Ben anyway, so I was a huge fan of him as a writer, and I'd known him since he was a student. So when Richard said, "Oh, what about bringing Ben on board?" It was just a great idea, because Rowan theoretically wrote the first series, but of course he didn't really. He's too busy having to do the acting. And he's not, Rowan is a genius, but a writer is not what he is. He's a performer. So Richard had to do a lot of it on his own. And so when Ben came in, suddenly you've got a real engine behind it, And the first 4 scripts they turned in the second series, I thought, these are absolutely brilliant. I mean, they just suddenly, it all come up in full colour and all that. But again, as so often, the success is not because anybody's a genius in the room, because, again, Rowan, I think, probably is a kind of a genius, because nobody knows where it comes from, but the rest of us just have to work very hard. So we got these 4 fabulous scripts, and Michael Grade had just come in from Channel 4 to be managing director of BBC Television. He was going through all the figures and going, somebody's commissioned another series of Blackadder. I saw it. I know it won an Emmy and everything, but I didn't think it was very funny. And look at the cost. Because the joke with the first series, it was in the day, it was $2 to the pound. It was known as the series that looked like $1 million and cost £1 million, because it went way, way over budget. So he said, "I'm going to cancel this because it's not worth it for the ratings." We didn't rate at all. We got terrible reviews the first series. So he cancelled it. And John Howard Davis, my boss, called me up and said he's cancelled it. I said, "But why?" He said, "It's too expensive for the slot." So I called Ben and Rich, and we spent this horrible weekend cutting out everything that cost money. So the first series, horses, guards, dogs, a huge castle. So everything was cut down to the bones. Cut out every bit of film, any props, any special effects. And that's why you have the Queen of England, Queenie, in a tiny little room with just her nanny. No guards. The Queen has no guards.
It's a budget
thing. It's just a budget thing. And from that developed the ideas why she got such a tiny room with no furniture, because she's a child. She's a little teenage girl. She's never grown up. And that's where, Miranda built her character off the back of that, really.
Do you know an old saying, necessity is the mother? And I don't want to make it a gender thing, John, but necessity is the mother of invention.
Well, I mean, I think there's a lot of truth in that. It's, why are things good? I don't know. I mean, but mainly for me, it's effort, it's hard work, it's people, and then there's chemistry, and then there's a bit of luck, but a lot of it is carrying on. Keep calm and carry on. It's like the people who last are the people who get back on the horse.
Exactly.
And my career really, if you were to really have the time and know about it, is mostly a series of disasters.
That's not true.
But it's with a small number of getting back on the horse and
massive success.
Well,
But it's true. It's true. I'm not saying you haven't had failures, but the successes are bloody huge.
Well, but again,
Well, yes. It's true, though. It's true. You can't sit there and say that, but it's true. So Blackadder, we could talk about forever. Spitting Image, I particularly want to talk to you about. Let's talk about some of the great voice people on there, because that's the aspect of it that fascinates me. Steve Coogan, obviously, Kate Robbins, Steve Nallen, Chris Barry, John Glover. Who else? Did Alistair McGowan? He did it, didn't he?
Not in my
Not
time.
in your. So in
No.
your time, who were the voices?
So the ones you mentioned, John Glover, Chris Barry,
Enrightel,
genius, John Sessions,
John
Kate Robbins.
Yeah.
Oh gosh, it was. And the funny thing is, I was astonished, even when it wasn't famous. They were so grateful to be asked,
Yeah.
And the last one, when I resigned again in a huff from Spitting Image, having had another disaster, and the last thing I did was I just had a tape in from a guy called Steve Coogan, and I said to the office, "Give this bloke a job. He's very good."
So all of those people are very talented that we've named. Not all of them have gone on to be big names. In the course of your career, have you been able to spot the ones that go on to glory?
Yeah, I've been good at spotting people. I think I remember the first time I saw Bob Hoskins in a thing called On the Move, which is a literacy program.
Yes.
Look, that guy's going to be huge.
Really?
Yeah.
What's the common denominator?
I don't know, because I think but what I know is that what I do is I come at everything just like an ordinary person.
So you're just spotting talent. I was hoping you might be able to say what the qualities are in that person, whether it's talent is a given, right? You have to have that. But then on top of that, tenacity or cunning. You remember Victor Spinetti?
Yeah.
Right. I knew Vic towards the end of his life, and he had worked with John Lennon quite closely. He'd worked with Richard Burton. He knew him pretty well. And Peter Sellers, he knew pretty well. And he'd been around Olivier. And I said, look, you've known these people that we would generally accept are greats. No one's going to question that about them. What did they have in common? And he said they all lived in the moment, and they weren't worried about, they weren't looking forward or back, so they weren't thinking about consequences. And I said, well, one aspect of that could make them very selfish. And he said yes, and he agreed.
Okay, so this is very, very interesting. And again, you've touched on something of core importance. So I would say, it's something I used to say about, it's about the zone. It's about when you're in the moment, this as a performer or anything, you're so completely there that you forget Rob Brydon isn't there. There's something other, isn't there? That you're just doing it. I used to get it as a film director, 4 hours would go by and you haven't thought about yourself at all. So getting into the zone, whether as a pianist or a painter or anything else, is the really important thing. And I don't think with greatness, the ego cannot be present in the moment of working. Afterwards, you can be any number of types of shit, and pompous narcissist and so on, but you won't be any good when you're working if your ego is present. And I used to say Picasso is a very good example. For example, he behaved very badly with his mistresses and was a bad friend and, quite greedy and all that kind of thing. But his work is undeniably great. And I bet he's like that. And I found this quote from him saying that when I enter my studio, I leave my personality outside the door as a Muslim leaves his slippers outside the mosque. And I thought, I think I'm right on that.
Yeah.
So I would say absolutely what you said there, but it's it's honesty, it's authenticity. And what all stand-ups have, all great comedians, all great actors, is they're able to look at the world, as it were, obviously you're one of them, but look at the world afresh. It's like spending the weekend with my friend Frank, who's a brilliant painter. We talked about this a lot, is actually what a caricaturist is doing and a painter is doing is exactly the same. It's close attention to detail, and that is very similar to living in the moment. I'm looking at that button on your shirt and seeing the way the light falls and realizing that even though a child would say it's silver, it's not really silver. There's a lot of gray there and a little bit of blue and a little reflection, and it's that thing of suddenly zooming in to the detail and everything becomes clear, and it's what passes for originality, but it isn't. It's the truth. By looking at things exactly and seeing it in a different way. And it's just something, as an impressionist, is which used to happen again and again on Spitting Image. People would come along and say, I think I've got David Steele, Harry Enfield would say, say.
Of course, Harry was one of the great.
It was Harry's first job.
Right.
So when Harry joined Spitting Image, Alan Yentob, who's a friend, had sent me this weird thing he'd done about, what was that actor thing, the guy he did? That
I'll tell you exactly who that was. Norbert Smith.
Norbert Smith. Anyway, it was the first iteration of Norbert Smith that he couldn't sell to anybody.
Do you remember the line in that where he says, he's showing them around the house and he says, in the grounds, he says, it's a converted vicarage. He says, it was a house, I had it converted into a vicarage. That's what he said.
I thought he was brilliant, but he could only, in those days, Harry only did two voices, apart from his made-up ones.
Yeah.
Which was a working class 1950s Brit and an upper class one.
Yeah.
The ones like that comes on Pethy News. And the other one is like that, that character.
Yeah.
So he did those two. So I thought, I've got to have this guy. He's going to be super famous. That's one person I spotted at the beginning. And he'd come along and he'd do, every week we used to have a Pathé News sketch because people thought, is John Lloyd sleeping with this guy? Because he seems to be, why is he here? And I think David Steele was the first one that Harry thought, I've got one. I've got a real person.
Right, yeah.
And he thought, well, that's not going to work, Harry. David Steele's got a perfectly normal voice. But of course he hasn't,
Yeah.
I'm half an inch taller than Neil Kinnock. And so Harry, so that's...
But he found a truth in that
That's
voice.
the thing. I remember when, I think Chris Barry did, Barry Norman. You think, but Barry Norman's just a normal, good-looking, normal person. No, he's not. His voice is weird. Yeah. But that's the thing, that I have this saying that all original thinking is truthful, and all truthful thinking is the same. So that's my mystical, gnomic utterance for you today, Rob, because that's what I think it is. It's about telling the truth.
Right. Look, we've we're
get on. Yes.
I want to talk to you about something on a personal level, which is, as a producer and a director, I know one of your passions now is your son's musical career, and it's a son that I've got. Your boy Harry. We both have Harrys.
Yes,
I think a lot of the best people do.
They do.
We won't go there. But and your Harry, who has a fascinating story, was a ski instructor for a while, and then something rather awful happened.
Yes, it was a dreadful, dreadful thing. He was a French ski instructor, moniteur de ski, école de ski française.
But he was English, John. Let's make that clear, please.
He is
I don't want anybody thinking he's some sort of Johnny foreigner. I mean, he's English through and through, but he was a ski instructor in France.
Yeah, and it's unusual to be that young, to be a Brit. And anyway, he's a very determined guy, and he qualified. And so for 3 years he worked as I think they're called stagiaires, so that each stage you do another exam and you go a bit more senior. When you start as a junior moniteur de ski with the ESF, you get paid 10% of what you earn at the company. When you finish, you're fully qualified, you get 90%. Wow. So he could have been at 24, seriously well paid. Anyway, he's on his very last qualificatory exam, which is avalanche training, right up on the high mountains. It's a perfect blue day, perfect snow, and he hit something under the powder, and he double ejects from his skis and somersaults and lands on his neck and broke his neck in 2 places. He's unbelievably lucky to be alive, and he was conscious. He didn't knock himself out, and they got him into the chopper to fly him to Grenoble, where Michael Schumacher, who had a very similar accident, still is in a coma. And we got the call, and we went out there, and it was awful because he was actually technically dead for 5 minutes because all sorts of things went wrong. He didn't know he had a morphine allergy, so they gave him a morphine shot in the helicopter, and he's fighting for life. And it's a rather wonderful story. So he was known in the Alps as Le Rouge, the red jacket, qui chante. So he'd be a ski instructor in the day, and then in the evenings he'd play piano in bars and be charming. And
it's like a character Elvis would have played in a film, isn't he?
So he had this horrible experience, and his heart stopped beating on the operating table for 5 minutes, but he survived. Anyway, in the chopper, he had this epiphany where he thought, if I get through this, if I survive, and it might not happen, then I'm going to dedicate my life to music, because I love skiing, I love ski instructing, but I'm kind of wasting my life. I can do that, and I need to do music.
Yeah.
So that's what he's done in the last 9 or so years. And something's happening at the moment, Rob, because he's got a new album out. And this album, something's happened. It's charted in Germany, Austria, and it's just gone straight into the charts in, you may say, Turkey. But it's number 19, the 19th most popular album in Turkey, that's never happened to us before. So it's very, very exciting.
And he goes by the name of Waiting for Smith.
Waiting for Smith, because we used to have a drummer called James Smith.
Yeah.
And Smith, though a very good drummer, was a very bad timekeeper.
It's often the way. Not a bad timekeeper, but he would be late for things. I hope he wasn't a bad timekeeper, John, because that would be awful for a drummer, wouldn't it?
Oh, you see, there you are. That's what a comedian does. Focus on the detail, spin it, and you've got a really funny idea. Yeah, so I used to be Harry's manager in those days. Brian Ego. I used to go...
Brian Ego.
Brian Ego, yeah. And I would turn up like this in the tie and at festivals and do that voice.
Would you
say,
seriously?
Yeah.
And just see it through
like that? Did I mention the rider, the M&Ms? No green ones, otherwise Waiting for Smith will be very pissed off.
Yeah.
I'm not kidding. He will walk. So Brian Ego used to be very involved in that. So it's very exciting. I don't manage him anymore. We have a proper grown-up manager.
So people can check him out. Obviously,
he's
because
all over
of the internet and all that stuff.
He's all over Spotify.
Yeah.
All the usual platforms. And there are lots. I think unusually because of me, principally, we've got a lot of videos. There's quite a few videos on YouTube that you can look at.
You must be inordinately proud.
Oddly, pride is, I usually use the word in awe, because if you've got a child who does something that you couldn't possibly do, I'm sure you have, it's like, where the heck? And I think Harry would say that. He's a kind of classic songwriter. Noel Gallagher used to say, he said on Desert Island Disc, I don't really write the songs. There's a man with a bucket of songs in the sky who pours it into my head. Yeah. That's Harry's like that.
Yeah, well, that's Chris Martin says that.
Exactly.
Well, there's parallels there with comedy, aren't there?
Have you had Chris Martin on this?
Yes. Yes. Oh.
Big fan I am.
Oh, I bloody adore him and his band and the positivity that they put in the world.
He's also such an interesting guy, isn't he?
Fascinating guy. So, yes, in awe. You're in awe of your Harry for what he can do.
Yeah.
Our time, by which I don't mean our lifespan, because we don't want to get into that, do we? But our time together now, talking, is almost up. What a pleasure! You're one of my favourite people,
Rob. But the same is true. This is of the other way around. I mean, this guy. He's not just funny. He's one of the best actors I've ever worked with. I'm not kidding, really.
Well, there we are. Really? What better place to end than there before there's a qualifying statement? Within his own limitations. John Lloyd, thank you so much. Let's shake hands like you've signed for my football team.